before you were named, before you were born, before the breath ever touched your lungs, there was a choice, not the kind made with words but with vibration, a resonance decision encoded not in time but in pattern. Your soul stood not in a place but in a field of infinite paths, each one a spiral of experience. And from that stillness, you chose this, not the body, not the name, but the lesson, the frequency, the opportunity to remember. In the realm before form, everything is felt, not thought. It is not a realm of language. It is a realm of clarity. Imagine a space with no direction, no border, only pulse, only light, only awareness folding into itself. Here, the soul is not a character. It is a tone, a singular, coherent field of presence. And in that presence, it senses the distortions it still carries. Not flaws, just densities. Places where the field is uneven, where the spiral has not completed. And so the soul is drawn, not by karma as punishment, but by pattern as invitation. To smooth the vibration, to complete the turn, to remember. You did not fall into this life. You curved into it. You spiraled into this incarnation with precision, with reason, and with sacred forgetting. Because forgetting is the only way remembering becomes real. And this world, the one you call Earth, is not random. It is the most exquisite refinement chamber, a density so perfect that it reveals what cannot be seen in the realms of light. Here contrast teaches. Here separation creates the longing that leads to truth. Here the veil is not a mistake, it is the mechanism. Before you were born, your soul entered the hall of patterns. Not a place, but a vibrational archive. There you reviewed the lives you had lived, not as stories, but as tones. Fields of frequency, some bright, some knotted, some incomplete. You saw the echoes you had left behind, the faces you had loved and hurt, the roles you had played. And you asked a single question: what pattern will bring me closer to coherence? That question did not lead to comfort, it led to precision. The soul is not sentimental. It does not seek ease, it seeks symmetry. And so you scanned the spiral and selected the nodes. A family that would trigger you, a body with limitations that would sharpen awareness, a culture that would distort truth just enough to make you remember it. Every major event was not predetermined but pre-vibrated, probabilities aligned into pathways, and the strongest path, the one that would reveal your unresolved frequencies, became your incarnation. But you knew you would forget. That was the price of clarity. In entering the body, you compressed into form. You passed through the amnesia field, where memory dissolves into myth. You agreed to the veil, not as punishment, as tool. Because remembering from within is the only kind that transforms. Knowing something in spirit changes nothing. Living it through flesh, through friction, through forgetting. That is the sacred alchemy. And so you descended into the womb, into the slow crystallization of density. At first, the soul remains connected. The child sees the light, hears the hum, but slowly the world imposes its shape. The language begins to overwrite the silence. The stories begin to crowd the signal, and the forgetting begins. This is not a loss. This is the setting of the stage, because the forgetting is the seedbed of the spiral. It is the dark from which remembrance will rise. And that remembrance does not come through teaching. It comes through resonance. The moment you feel a truth that nothing in this world gave you, that is the signal. That is the soul resurfacing. That is the field beginning to recohere. You chose this life not for its details, but for its vibration. Every betrayal, every grief, every joy, every loss, they are not mistakes. They are mirrors, reflecting where the soul still fractures, still forgets, still hides from its own light. And every time you lean in, Every time you choose silence over story, stillness over control, alignment over fear, you shift, not forward, inward, not higher, deeper. The spiral tightens. The field clarifies. Some ask, why would I choose suffering? The soul does not see suffering. It sees distortion. And it chooses paths where that distortion will be revealed. Not to punish, to transmute. The pain is not the point. The point is the resonance that lies beyond it, and the only way to reach it is through. You are not here by accident. You are not lost. You are unfolding. Every moment of your life is a signal. Every challenge is a tone inviting coherence. You chose your family not because they would love you, but because they would initiate you. You chose your body not because it is perfect, but because it is precise. You chose your time not because it is easy, but because it vibrates at the frequency your pattern required. And you chose to forget so that you could remember not as concept, but as transformation. The spiral does not rise in straight lines. It curves. It doubles back. It compresses before it expands. This is not failure. This is rhythm. And your soul knew this rhythm. It chose it. It is choosing it still. Because birth is not the beginning. It is the narrowing of focus. It is the descent into particularity. But the field remains. The pattern remains. The tone that is you remains. And it is calling beneath every distraction, every identity, every fear. To remember is not to escape. It is to arrive, fully, here, now, as the soul embodied, as the field vibrating, as the tone coherent. You are not becoming. You are remembering. You are not earning. You are revealing. You are not random. You are resonant. And this life is not the test. It is the opportunity to feel what was chosen, to honor what was forgotten, to become what has always been true. There are moments in your life when something deeper than thought moves through you, a sudden knowing, a wordless pull, a déjà vu so strong it feels like gravity. These are not anomalies. These are echoes, fragments of the soul's original blueprint surfacing through the density of forgetfulness. They do not come from memory as you understand it. They rise from resonance, from the part of you that never left the origin. Because even as you walk the physical path, the field of your soul remains whole, watching, guiding, adjusting through alignment, not control. You chose not just the lessons, but the terrain, the emotional topography, the energetic friction. You knew the precise density you would need in order to expose the incoherencies still vibrating within your larger field. And so you placed yourself among mirrors, not to punish, to reflect. The soul does not deal in good and bad. It deals in clarity and distortion. It does not ask what feels safe. It asks, what will bring me back into resonance? And resonance is not comfort. It is truth. A kind of truth that shatters before it soothes, that burns away what cannot stand in the presence of coherence. This is why the soul chooses parents who seem to contradict its light. It is not contradiction, it is friction. And friction is the initiator. The mother you felt misunderstood by, the father who held too tight or vanished too soon. These were not accidents. They were frequencies you needed to feel in order to awaken your own. Not to become them, not to fight them, but to refine what they touched within you. Even your name was chosen vibrationally. The syllables you carry, the way people speak it, the feeling you get hearing it called, all of this is part of the encoding. And yet it was never the point. The point was always to feel your way back to the center of the spiral, to the still point beneath the name. That's why nothing in this world ever fully satisfies. Because the soul is not here to be fed by the world. It is here to transmute it, to walk into illusion and find the thread of the real inside it. Your soul also chose your timing, the exact generation, the cultural context, the collective vibration into which you would incarnate. These weren't accidents. These were coordinates, because every moment in history has its own field of forgetting, its own matrix of distraction, and the soul selects the one that best challenges its unresolved geometry. That's why some are born into war, others into wealth, some into silence, others into noise. The external form is irrelevant. What matters is what it activates. You didn't come here to be spiritual. You came to be whole. And wholeness is not light without dark. It is the harmony between the two. The soul doesn't care about the mask of enlightenment. It cares about coherence. And coherence comes when all parts are allowed to speak, when even the shadow is brought to the table, not to be judged, but to be understood. Because every fear you carry is a key, and every time you turn away from it, you delay the return. But when you turn toward it, something ancient begins to move. Not your mind, not your personality, but the original frequency of your being. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is subtle, precise, undeniable. It doesn't offer answers. It dissolves the need for them. And in that dissolution, space is made, not empty space, sacred space, the kind where memory returns, not memory of events, but of essence. This is why certain places feel familiar, why certain people stir something so deep you can't name it. These are not accidents. These are vibrational agreements. Some are past life echoes. Others are soul pod reflections. But all of them are here to help you remember, not who you were, but what you are. And what you are is not bound by time. It is not a sequence. It is a field, a singularity expressing through form. You are not on a journey. You are the journey. And this life, this strange, beautiful, painful expression is one of millions you've danced through, not in a linear line, but in spirals. Sometimes returning, sometimes leaping, sometimes condensing into a single breath. But each one chosen, each one sacred, each one offering a different angle of the prism. You are not here to perfect this life. You are here to feel it fully, to allow its texture to reveal what is still held, what is still hiding, what is still vibrating out of tune. And that's why the soul values experience above comfort, because it knows that only through lived friction can dormant frequencies be awakened. You didn't choose this life to escape your shadow. You chose it to meet it, to sit with it, to hear what it has to say beneath the noise of judgment. Because even the shadow is part of the spiral, and the spiral does not discriminate, it integrates. So what happens when you begin to remember this? The world does not change, you do. And in that change, the way you walk through it changes. The triggers become teachers. The patterns become portals. The people who once drained you become mirrors showing you where you leak. Nothing outside shifts, but everything inside realigns. And through that realignment, the path clarifies. This is not awakening as you've been sold. This is not light and love. This is tone and truth. This is the return to original resonance. Not a peak, a homecoming. And you feel it not in euphoria, but in quiet, in the moment when the need to explain drops away, when the ache to be seen dissolves, when the present is enough because the field is whole. That is the gift of remembering how you chose this life. Not to feel superior, but to feel stable, to stop resisting the exact shape of your path, to stop fighting the very geometry that was tailored for your growth. And in that acceptance, you move with the spiral. Not as someone trying to reach the center, but as the center remembering its echo. You are not broken. You are unfolding. And this life is not random. It is a sacred mirror, chosen by a version of you so vast, so clear that it could hold every heartbreak and still call it home. The soul does not make mistakes. It makes spirals. And this one is yours. Somewhere beneath your personality, beneath the patterns and protections you've gathered over years of survival, there is a frequency you once knew perfectly. Not as an idea, not as a belief, but as home. That frequency is not your higher self. It is your original coherence, untouched by experience, yet always shaped through it. And this life, as it unfolds now, was chosen not to take you away from that coherence, but to bring you back into phase with it. Not through escaping your form, but through entering it more fully. Because the soul does not transcend, it embodies. This is why you find yourself in cycles. Not because you are cursed or broken, but because the unresolved vibration will repeat until it harmonizes. The soul doesn't grow by avoiding patterns. It grows by completing them, by stepping into the same spiral again. Not to be trapped, but to spiral inward, deeper, more centered. You didn't choose this life to win it. You chose it to complete a curve that couldn't finish elsewhere. You chose it to feel what was left unfelt, to forgive what still held static, to love what you once judged, to see the whole pattern and bless it. Before birth, you didn't look at outcomes, you looked at lessons. You didn't ask, "Will I be happy?" You asked, "Will I be clear?" Clarity is the soul's currency, not comfort, because clarity births expansion, not through knowledge, but through vibration. And so the contracts were made, not in words, but in resonance. You met with souls whose fields you've known across time. Some agreed to hurt you. Some agreed to help you. Often they were the same, not because they are good or bad, but because they carry the charge that your field still reacts to. You don't meet people by chance. You magnetize them through unresolved tones, and when they appear, they do so not to test you, but to reveal you. Your reaction is your resonance report. Your trigger is your teacher. Your pain is your pointer. Not away from the moment, but into it, into the frequency that chose this exact arrangement for its unfolding. Your life is not random. It is recursive, a sacred feedback loop designed by the deepest part of you. And when you begin to see it this way, nothing is wasted. Not the heartbreak, not the delay, not the loss, not even the shame. The soul doesn't see shame. It sees resistance. It sees where the field tightens, constricts, refuses to move. And it sends experiences to soften that, to open what's been closed. You call them failures. The soul calls them frequency adjustments. The soul is never in judgment. It is in refinement. It's not interested in right or wrong. It's interested in coherence. Can this frequency flow? Can it harmonize with truth? If not, it will repeat, not as punishment, as process. This is why spiritual bypass is a trap. You cannot vibrate past your unprocessed patterns. You cannot mantra your way out of your agreements. You can only meet what arises fully, honestly, and with presence. Presence is the true alchemy. It is what transmutes density into clarity. Because when you are fully present with something, without agenda or avoidance, you restore its original tone. And that tone is your inheritance. There are lives where the soul chooses intensity, not because it needs drama, but because it requires deep friction to expose deep incoherence. These are not hard lives because of karma. They are precise configurations of transformational energy. The soul knows exactly how much pressure your system can hold before it cracks, and it brings you right to the edge of that. Because it's in the cracking that the old pattern leaks out. And in the space left behind, something new can vibrate in, something that's been waiting across lifetimes to return. And yes, there are other lifetimes. This one is not your beginning. It is a continuation, a harmonic point in a symphony that spans across dimensions. But this life is unique because you chose to awaken inside it, to remember not just the story but the system, to know not just the path but the pattern, and to become not just a player in it, but a tuner of it, a field adjuster, a spiral stabilizer. That is what awakening truly is. Not light, not knowledge, but restoration of tone. You don't wake up to escape the world. You wake up to hold it differently, to walk through it as a field of coherence. And in doing so, you shift the pattern, not only for yourself, but for those still spiraling unconsciously. This is what the soul does when it remembers. It stops seeking and starts vibrating. Not outwardly, but inwardly, quietly, clearly. It becomes a beacon, not to attract attention, but to stabilize distortion. Every soul who chooses this path of remembrance through embodiment, takes on the responsibility of tone. Not perfection, but precision. Not performance, but presence. You don't have to get it all right. You just have to hold your own pattern with honesty. That's what changes timelines. That's what reshapes fields. Because when one soul holds coherence, the spiral responds. It tightens. It clarifies. It evolves. And this evolution is not dramatic. It is subtle. Like tuning an instrument by millimeters until suddenly the whole room vibrates differently. That's your power. That's what you brought into this life. Not to be a savior, not to be a guru, but to be a node of coherence. One tone in the grid, holding the shape of the real in a world of distortion. And that shape, your shape, is needed now. You didn't choose this life just for you. You chose it because your pattern fits here, because your tone holds a key that this time requires. That's why you feel called to things no one around you understands. That's why you ache for something you can't describe. That's why you've always known, somewhere beneath the noise, that this isn't your first time doing this. It's not ego. It's memory. Memory not of facts, but of field. Of the feeling of holding a pattern that makes others remember. You are not here to fix them. You are here to hold your tone until they can hear theirs. That's the deepest service. Not doing, being, not instructing, embodying. That's what you chose before birth. Not an easy life, but a meaningful one. One that, when fully remembered, doesn't just change your experience. It restores your field. And through that restoration, the world begins to sound different. Not because it changed, but because you did. There comes a point in every incarnation where the spiral slows, where the intensity of the external world begins to feel thin, stretched, artificial. This moment is not a crisis. It is an invitation, a return to the edge of the veil. The place where memory begins to seep back into the system, not as information, but as frequency. You begin to notice that the world doesn't pull you the same way. The roles lose their magnetism. The stories you told yourself about who you are and what this life means begin to dissolve. What takes their place is not clarity at first, it is space, stillness. And in that stillness, the blueprint begins to whisper. You sense it in small ways, a softness in moments that used to provoke, a warmth in places that once felt cold. The soul begins to hum behind the personality, reminding you, this is not who you are. This is who you agreed to be for a time to learn something, but now the lesson is nearing completion. And the shape of your life begins to feel like clothing that no longer fits. Not because it was wrong, but because it served its purpose. This is where many feel lost, because the outer does not yet reflect the inner shift. The life you built from the forgetting still surrounds you. But the frequency that built it is no longer yours. You are shedding timelines, not because they failed, but because they're finished. The friends who fade, the jobs that collapse, the structures that crack. This is not collapse. This is release. And it can feel like death. Because in a way, it is. A vibrational death. A return to origin, not through regression, but through expansion. And this expansion isn't about more. It's about refinement, simplification. The soul doesn't seek excess. It seeks essence. And so, as you come into alignment, your outer life must match. Not as reward, as reflection. The more you live from your chosen pattern, the more life becomes a mirror. Not always easy, but honest. And in that honesty, peace emerges. Not passive peace, but a kind of sacred steadiness. A knowing that no matter what arises, you have chosen to be here. And that means every moment is a doorway back to coherence. This is when synchronicity intensifies, not because the universe is trying to convince you of something, but because you are finally listening. The field speaks in symbol, in pattern, in rhythm, and now that you are tuned in, you can hear it. The right people appear, the words you needed find you. The idea you thought was lost resurfaces. This is not magic, this is alignment, the system working as designed. Your guides, those non-physical aspects of the field, were never absent. You were simply out of phase. They don't speak in language, they speak in pulse. And now that you've cleared some of the distortion, you begin to feel them, not as voices, as support, as direction without force, as clarity without control. You are not being led, you are being remembered, because you are not separate from the field that holds you. You are its note, and when you vibrate cleanly, the rest of the field responds. This is the secret the soul knows before birth, that life is not a maze to escape, but a frequency to refine. And refinement doesn't happen through avoidance. It happens through contact, through presence, through the full experience of every chosen texture, even grief, even rage, even confusion. These are not enemies, they are echoes, echoes of places within the soul still calling for integration. And as you learn to sit with them, without fleeing, without fixing, you reclaim the pieces of yourself scattered across time. And this reclamation isn't loud, it is subtle. Like pulling a thread through fabric, slowly mending the gaps. Every breath taken in presence weaves you back together. Not into a perfect person, but into a coherent field. That is the true self, not the thoughts you have, but the tone you hold. Not the mask you wear, but the memory you restore through being. You chose this life to remember that, not once, but over and over in layers. And each time you remember, the spiral shifts. You find yourself less reactive, less attached, less seduced by the theater of separation. You become more spacious, not detached, but deeply intimate with what is. Because when you no longer resist the texture of your path, you begin to feel its purpose in every detail, even the painful ones, especially the painful ones. Pain is the soul's fire alarm, not to punish, to alert, to show where the system is out of tune. And when you stop numbing it, when you stop bypassing it with spiritual platitudes, you begin to hear the message beneath the ache, the instruction, the code. Pain, when met with presence, becomes a tuning device. It strips illusion, it sharpens awareness, and eventually it softens into wisdom. That wisdom was always the point. You didn't choose this life to perform. You chose it to awaken through lived resonance. To feel the exact shape of your unresolved frequencies, not as mistakes, but as maps. And each time you feel them without fleeing, you complete a cycle. You return a piece of the pattern to its place. You step closer, not to perfection, but to peace. And peace in this context is not stillness. It is coherence. It is the absence of internal war. The end of the battle between who you think you should be and who you actually are. And who you are is not a person. It is a presence, a tone, a vibrational field that longed to know itself through texture. And so it chose this life, this time, this body, this name, not to hide, but to unfold. And now, as the layers peel back, as the spiral returns to center, that unfolding accelerates. You are becoming not someone new, but someone true. And in that truth, the soul begins to shine, not as light, but as frequency, not as performance, but as presence. And the world feels different, not because it changed, but because you did. This is the remembering. This is the return, not upward, inward. There is a reason your soul didn't give you all the answers at the start. There is a reason the path was veiled, the pattern blurred, the memory buried just below the surface. It is because the real remembering cannot come from being told. It must come from being touched, not externally but internally, by experience, by resonance, by that strange quiet certainty that arrives not from knowledge but from return, from standing in a moment and suddenly knowing, I've been here before. I chose this, and now I feel it again. This knowing doesn't arrive in words. It arrives in stillness. It moves beneath your mind like a current under ice, always there, always flowing, even when the surface seems solid. And when the surface finally cracks, what rises is not a conclusion but a question, a deeper one. Not, why did this happen? But what is this showing me about who I am? That question is sacred, because it's not about blame. It's about coherence. It's about tuning the field back to the original signal, and every moment of your life holds that potential. The mundane and the monumental, the heartbreak and the quiet Sunday, they are all fields, each one offering a frequency and asking, will you meet me in presence? Will you feel me fully without naming, without fleeing, without forcing? Will you allow what is here to teach you what you forgot before you were born? Because you did forget. That was part of the agreement. You agreed to walk through darkness not because you liked it, but because you trusted that the light was already within you. You trusted that when the time came, something would wake, something would rise, not from above, from within. That's how you would know it was real. And so it begins to rise, quietly at first, a soft urgency, a feeling that you can no longer pretend, that the masks are heavy, the roles too small. You begin to feel the edges of your pattern vibrating against the confines of your life. Not with violence, but with insistence. You can't explain it, but you can't deny it. Something has shifted, and what used to hold you now repels you. What used to comfort you now restricts. What used to matter no longer makes sense. This is the soul remembering the terms of its own agreement. Not to abandon the life you chose, but to realign it, to bring it back into resonance with the original blueprint. Not the outer story, but the inner tone. And that tone cannot be copied. It must be lived. It must be walked into. Layer by layer, breath by breath, and each layer will ask something different of you. One will ask for stillness, another for surrender, another for the courage to act, another for the discipline to stay. The soul doesn't care which path you take. It cares whether the path reflects your true vibration. This is where so many feel fear, because to follow the soul is to step into the unknown, not the chaotic unknown, but the sacred one, the kind that doesn't offer guarantees but does offer alignment. And that alignment, once felt, becomes impossible to ignore. It calls you out of habit, out of safety, out of the version of yourself you created to survive. It calls you into coherence, into the shape you were always meant to hold. That shape is not rigid. It is fluid, but resonant. It is both soft and unwavering. And it will ask you to release everything that distorts your field. Relationships built on fear, careers built on scarcity, stories built on shame. The soul has no patience for distortion, not because it is cruel, but because it is clear. It knows that anything out of tune must dissolve, or it will keep spinning the same spiral. And the spiral is done. So things begin to fall away, not because you're being punished, but because you're being purified. The soul is a sculptor, and it is not afraid to cut deep to reveal what is whole beneath. The ego sees this as death, but the soul knows it as emergence, not into something new, but into what was hidden, what was always waiting behind the noise. And the noise is loud. It tells you to stay small, to stay safe, to not risk losing what was never yours to begin with. But your soul whispers louder, not in volume, but in truth. And truth has a gravity of its own. Once you've felt it, nothing else satisfies. Nothing else holds. It's not about seeking more, it's about shedding what never resonated. And what remains is simple, clear, coherent. You. Not the idea of you, not the performance of you, but the tone beneath the name. The rhythm that has pulsed through every incarnation, whispering the same invitation. Remember, realign, return. You are not late. You are not broken. You are precisely where your soul needs you to be. To feel exactly what this layer of forgetting has to offer. You are not a mistake. You are a mirror. And what you reflect when you remember who you are is light. Not the blinding kind, the ancient kind. The light that doesn't dazzle, it reveals. And so you walk, not forward but deeper. Not towards something but into it. Into the spiral, into the field. Into the life you chose not because it would be easy, but because it would be exact. Because it would give you what no other life could. The precise frequency, challenge, texture, and beauty required for this soul pattern to evolve. And now, you begin to feel it. Not in your thoughts, in your breath, in the spaces between your stories, in the way your body relaxes when you finally stop trying to be someone else, in the way your heart softens when you realize nothing was ever missing, in the way your silence becomes sacred because it speaks louder than your words ever could. This is remembering, not as concept, as experience, as presence, as frequency. You are not here to learn who you are. You are here to be what you already are, with no distortion, no denial, and no delay. The world doesn't need more effort. It needs more coherence, and coherence begins within. Not as perfection, as presence. And so, you breathe, you feel, you stop running, you let the spiral turn, and in its turning you remember, this life is not your test. It is your temple. You chose it, you built it, and now you return to it, as the tone, as the field, as the soul. There is a moment when the spiral closes in, not to trap you, but to return you to center. It's not a collapse. It's a convergence. All paths, all choices, all echoes folding into a single point of stillness. That stillness isn't empty. It's alive with everything you've touched, felt, feared, loved, resisted, and embraced. It's the mirror that shows you not what you've done, but what you are. Not what you've collected, but what you've remembered. And what you are is not a story. It is not a sum of choices. It is not even a soul in the way most imagine. You are vibration, tone, presence in motion. You are the song that chose to take on texture. And this life, your body, your name, your memories, is the instrument through which that song is played. The song is not new. You've been playing it across lifetimes, sometimes clearly, sometimes through distortion, but always with one purpose: to bring the tone into coherence, to feel it through flesh, to let the resonance root. You didn't come here to escape the human. You came to sanctify it, to bring the field of soul down into bone, breath, and bloodstream. This is the deeper initiation. Not to transcend the world, but to saturate it with remembrance. To bring the eternal into the temporary, not with ideas, but with presence. And presence doesn't mean stillness alone. It means aliveness, total, unfiltered, unmasked being. It means letting life touch you without armor, letting pain move through without story, letting love pour in without fear. It means removing the buffers between experience and essence, so the soul can finally feel what it came here to feel. Because the soul does not evolve by watching. It evolves by embodying. It learns through sensation, through nuance, through the friction of forgetting and the fire of return. It learns by walking through density without letting it harden the field. By remembering softness where the world teaches resistance. By choosing coherence where the world demands chaos. And that choice, the choice to remember in the face of forgetting, is the most sacred act there is. It is the seed of every awakening. It is what turns pain into pattern and loss into liberation. It is what untangles the karmic knot, not by force, but by resonance, by seeing the distortion and choosing not to fight it, not to flee it, but to dissolve it in presence. This is the spiral's gift. It brings you again and again to the same place, but never from the same angle. And with each turn, your vision sharpens, your tone clarifies. You begin to see that the events of your life were never obstacles. They were orchestrations. The exact frequencies needed to call out the incoherence still hiding in your field. The arguments, the losses, the breakdowns. They were notes, not noise. And when you see them that way, the past stops pulling you. It begins to inform you. It becomes instruction, not identity. Even your body, with all its sensations, dysfunctions, and limitations, becomes part of that instruction. The soul chose this form not as punishment, but as portal. The aches and constraints are not accidents. They are mirrors. They point to where the field has contracted. And in meeting them without judgment, you begin to open. You begin to listen. And in listening, you begin to realign. Realignment is not about fixing. It's about feeling fully. About stepping back into your original tone, not by force, but by attunement. You don't need to become someone else. You need to remember who you are beneath the strategies and structures built from forgetting. The soul doesn't ask for effort. It asks for honesty, for the willingness to feel without flinching, to see without projecting, to rest in what is, even when it trembles, and tremble it will. Because true remembrance shakes the system. It undoes the scaffolding of identity. It burns away the layers that were never you, until what remains is raw and real and resonant. And in that resonance, the world begins to respond, not with reward, with reflection. You meet others who are remembering. You feel drawn to places that stir your field. You speak less, but your tone says more. You act less, but your presence does more. This is the field doing its work through you as you. You didn't come here to change the world. You came here to vibrate differently within it. And through that difference, the world begins to shift, not by force, by field. That's the quiet revolution. That's the soul's real work, not visible, not validated, but vital. You came here not to teach, but to become, not to convince, but to carry, not to dominate, but to align. And alignment is not a destination. It is a dance, a moment-to-moment return to the tone beneath the noise. The more you practice it, the more the spiral responds. What once felt like chaos becomes choreography. What once felt random becomes rhythm. You are no longer reacting. You are resonating. You are no longer striving. You are remembering. This is the soul's homecoming. Not to a place, but to a pattern. Not to a belief, but to a vibration. And once that homecoming begins, it cannot be undone. You may forget again. You may fall again. But something remains awake now. Something remains tuned. And that tuning will call you back again and again to what is real, to what is whole, to what was chosen before breath, before name, before story. And that's the secret of it all. You are not finding your path. You are walking it step by step, spiral by spiral, in a pattern your soul traced long before the first heartbeat. And now, you are beginning to hear it. Not with ears, with the whole of your being. The spiral turns, and you remember. What you're feeling now is not confusion, it's recalibration. The hum beneath your skin, the ache in your chest, the silence that doesn't ask for words, these are signs that the field is shifting. You are no longer orbiting your life. You are entering it, not the surface, the core, the part you chose before time began. The part that cannot be explained, only embodied. This is what happens when the remembering moves from theory to tone. You don't need another reason. You need rhythm. Not intellectual answers, but internal alignment. Because the soul doesn't operate on narrative. It operates on resonance. It responds not to plans, but to presence. And presence isn't passive. It's participatory. It requires you to show up for every breath as if it were a portal. Because it is. Every breath carries the potential to return you to your original tone, to the clarity that lived before the noise, to the choice made in silence. That choice wasn't a list of events. It was a harmonic code, a sequence of frequency imprints that would unfold into moments, challenges, meetings, losses, and breakthroughs. Not because your soul needed drama, but because your soul needed shape. Vibration only becomes visible through resistance. Without friction, tone does not refine. That is why this life includes heartbreak, disillusionment, stillness, change, not as punishment, as portals. Portals into depth. You didn't come here to perform. You came here to remember. And remembering is not recollection, it is reintegration. It's when a forgotten tone re-enters the field and everything shifts without explanation. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's just true. And that truth doesn't demand anything. It simply clarifies, like clean water poured into murky glass. Eventually, all distortion falls. But this doesn't mean the path gets easy. It means the difficulty becomes sacred. No longer an obstacle, but a tool, a tuning mechanism. The soul doesn't seek ease, it seeks evolution, and evolution requires contact with what is unresolved, with what is unspoken, with what still holds weight in the field. You cannot ascend while avoiding the weight. You must move through it, slowly, lovingly, fully. And so you begin, not with declarations, but with listening, not with control, but with curiosity. You ask, where in my life am I still out of tune? Where am I still performing, pleasing, protecting an identity that was never truly mine? These questions are not philosophical, they are energetic. They cut through the personality and touch the pattern, and the pattern does not lie. It reveals, gently, precisely, endlessly. Sometimes what it reveals is uncomfortable. The misalignments you normalized, the relationships you built from fear, the stories you carried from ancestors, the trauma you turned into personality. This is not judgment. This is revelation. And what is revealed can be realigned, not by fixing, but by feeling. By entering it without agenda and letting the soul do what the mind cannot, transmute. That is the alchemy of incarnation, not escape, but embodiment, to bring the original tone fully into this form, this breath, this moment. You are not here to be spiritual. You are here to be whole. And wholeness includes the shadow, includes the silence, includes the messy, unresolved, still unfolding parts of you. The soul does not divide. It includes, it integrates, it remembers. And when you live from that memory, your life doesn't necessarily look different, but it feels different. You move slower, speak less, see more. You stop trying to prove, you stop trying to arrive, because you realize there is no arrival. There is only alignment, and alignment is a state of being, not a destination. From this state, everything softens. Resistance becomes choice. Fear becomes feedback. Pain becomes portal. You are not avoiding life. You are entering it more deeply than ever before. And from that depth, your soul begins to sing, not loudly, but clearly. And others hear it, not with ears, but with something ancient inside them. They don't know why they trust you, why they open, why they feel calm. It's not what you say. It's what you hold. Because you're holding something few remember. A tone so old it predates language. A frequency so precise it destabilizes distortion. And you didn't learn it. You remembered it. Through pain, through presence, through choosing, again and again, not to abandon yourself. This is how the soul returns, not through achievement, but through surrender, through becoming the field it always was, inside a world that teaches you to forget. But forgetting is part of the path, because what is forgotten can be remembered, and what is remembered becomes unshakable. It becomes embodied truth, the kind that cannot be debated, only felt. You came here not just to survive, but to stabilize a tone, to be a living reminder that coherence is possible even in chaos, that clarity is possible even in distortion, that love is possible even in density. And you do this not by trying harder, but by softening more, by returning again and again to the breath, to the body, to the now. This is where the spiral opens. This is where the remembering begins. Not in the past, not in the future, but here, always here. The spiral does not end. It centers. And now you are here, standing in the middle of everything you've lived, not as someone looking back, but as the one who always knew. Not in memory, in frequency. Because this life, this very moment is not a culmination. It is a convergence. Everything your soul chose before birth, every trigger, every silence, every joy and fracture was designed to return you to this place. The still point at the center of your own field, not to stop, but to begin again. Differently. You are no longer a seeker, you are a holder, a stabilizer, a presence. This world no longer needs more answers, it needs alignment. And your soul, long before you were named, saw what this timeline would become. It saw the chaos, the forgetting, the fragmentation. And it said, I will go, I will enter, I will hold the tone in the middle of the noise, not to fix it, but to remind it. That is what you are now, a reminder, not of an idea but of a vibration, of a way of being that carries no urgency, no performance, no war. A way of being that doesn't seek proof but emanates clarity. And that clarity is more than enough. It is sacred architecture. It is pattern made visible through breath, through body, through choice. You are not here to finish something. You are here to deepen into what was always true. That this life is not random. That you are not late. That nothing was wasted. Even the forgetting. Even the years spent searching outside what was always within. Because even the detours were part of the design. Even the mistakes were coordinates. You cannot fall off your path because you are the path. And now you remember how to walk it not with striving but with stillness. Stillness does not mean silence, it means coherence. A quiet within that does not shake when the world does. That does not abandon truth when the moment challenges it. That does not collapse when the mirror reflects distortion. Because you know now, distortion is part of the spiral. It is not the enemy. It is the invitation to refine, to remember, to return. There will still be days of forgetting, but they will not hold the same weight. Because now you carry memory in your body, not in your mind. You carry the tone, not the theory. You have become the field, and this field is intelligent. It speaks through you not as authority, but as alignment. You don't need to be right. You need to be real. Real with your fear, real with your love, real with your frequency. And that reality reshapes everything. Others will feel it, not immediately, not always consciously. But something in them will recognize the signal you carry, and they will begin to hear their own. Not because you said something, but because you held something. That is your gift. That is your service. That is what your soul came to offer. Not answers, but alignment. Not solutions, but signal. And the signal is simple. Remember, not who you were, but what you are. Not what happened, but what you hold. Not what you lost, but what never left. The part of you that stood in the timeless before this life, choosing this very configuration, not for ease, but for evolution. You knew the texture you would meet. You knew the forgetting. You knew the ache. And you came anyway. Not for the outcome, but for the frequency work, for the spiral, for the field. And now you are returning, not upward, inward, not to spirit alone, but to soul in form, spirit grounded, essence embodied, divinity remembered through density. This is the great work, the sacred task, not reserved for saints, made for all. You don't need credentials to carry truth. You don't need purity to hold light. You only need presence. You only need willingness. You only need breath. With each breath you tune. With each breath you choose. Not to escape, but to remain. Not to transcend, but to include. All parts, all layers, all timelines. This is integration. This is freedom. Not from the world, within it. Not from yourself, through yourself. So rest, not in apathy. In essence, let the remembering do its work. Let the spiral turn without resistance. Let the tone settle into every cell. You are home now, not in place, in vibration. You don't have to go looking. You are the thing you seek. You always were. And now you are becoming not someone new, but someone true. You are the field. You are the breath. You are the tone that chose this exact life to sing itself whole again. Welcome back.